All right, well, welcome everybody. It's ICF Orange County, Tuesday, May 19th, I believe it is. And today we have our coaching and technology series with Vanya Koonce. And Vanya is, I'm going to read her bio. Vanya is a leader of this virtual group at Coaching and Technology. And it's a place where coaches can ask questions and share knowledge related to technological trends, software platforms, applications, and the future of coaching. Vanya has an extensive education and background in psychology, organizational development, personal growth, and entrepreneurship. She draws on a wide range of coaching skills integrated in her private practice, Be Yourself. She's also co-founder of an exciting new interactive coaching app, Agile Goals. And her guest today is Tom Marsden, and he's going to talk to us about coaching bots. And Vanya, I'll just pass it over to you, and you should feel free to introduce Tom. And I'm really excited to hear everything you have to say, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Even though we have we have an updated, there is updated version because I developed the coaching app 2 years ago, and it's not in the market. And I sold my part to my partner back then. So probably we should delete that, scratch that part. However, I'm so into technology. I've been leading this. This is my third year with leading this webinar, and I know some of the people that they just joined. I know them personally. They've been following me for a while. Some of you are new. So I would encourage everybody to just tap into the chat box and tell us what would you like to learn in this particular session overall for technology matter that is related to coaching. And we want to keep this very conversational format. I would love for you to ask all the questions that you have, and hopefully with Tom we'll be able to answer them. If not, we'll just have something to think and take on after the conversation. So I'm very fortunate to know Tom like for quite some time and follow his work and connect with him, learn from him and his passion to really deliver a product to coaches and companies that makes difference, and plans to develop and to really kind of support managers and teams to integrate coaching in a more efficient way and be accessible anytime and any moment. Thank you for all of you that you're tapping into the chat box. I will say just a few words about Tom, that he has a background in organizational development, and he worked for McKinsey, and he's a bright entrepreneur. And I'm so grateful for you, Tom, to join us today. Is there anything that you want to add to your background, just to give our guest a snap?
Sure, yeah. Just to give you a little flavor of my background. So I spent about 10 years, actually started my career in finance, funding management buyouts and leverage buyouts in Europe across different industries. Then, as you said, I went into McKinsey as a consultant and worked initially again in corporate finance, but quite soon became more and more interested by the fact that the thing that was really driving the numbers were the people. And that was what I would say I made my switch from the sort of the hard stuff to the soft stuff, the people part of business, and how important really ultimately it is people that drive everything in business. And so spent some time doing a lot of organization change and effectiveness work at McKinsey, and then I joined an HR services business to run the consulting practice there for about 8 years, a company called AMS, and that had a group of teams of people doing everything from sort of workforce planning to branding, assessment, technology implementations, and business intelligence. And then I've been, after that, I joined Sabre. And at the moment, I'm now CEO of Sabre. And as you say, we're a technology business, which is developing products to help managers coach teams effectively and get the best out of their teams.
Great, thank you. And thank you for giving us overview of your rich background. So this session is gonna be a little bit different. We will keep it conversational, as I already said, and we're not gonna like present or have PowerPoint or anything for you to share, but I want to start with, how did you come up with the CoachBot that is part of the services that Sabre offers? What happened then? What kind of opportunity you guys seized that you decide to experiment and develop this bot?
Yeah, so CoachBot is our second product, and actually the story of Sabre started with my colleague, a guy called Alistair Shepherd, who founded Sabre. And Alistair was studying, he was in the States doing a Kaufman Scholarship, and he was at Harvard studying with a professor there called Noam Wasserman. And he was studying entrepreneurship. And he got really interested by some research that showed in early stage companies, one of the biggest problems that founders were finding was making teams work together. So they did some research with several thousand early stage companies, and they found that when they interviewed the founders to understand why some of those companies had failed, quite a high failure rate, sort of 85% plus failure rate in early stage tech companies. And they interviewed a whole series of founders, several thousand founders, and asked them, well, what went wrong? And the thing that came up again and again and again, the most cited reason was team dynamics were really difficult to manage. So obviously there were a lot of other things like lack of product market fit, or we run out of cash, or whatever it may be. But the root issue seemed to be getting teams to work together. And actually that led to some research to say, well, why is it so hard to predict the chemistry between people in a team? And we did some research looking to understand whether we could get deeper into sort of understanding what was going on with the chemistry. And there were two types of research we did. One was actually looking sort of slightly tangentially at online dating. And the reason we went to online dating is because there's a very rich source of data. There's a huge amount of data which is showing why people found compatible matches. So we were looking for where people find a compatible match on an online dating site, and we were looking at the questions that they'd answer in profile questions to understand what was predicting that moment, that match. And what we found as we probed the data, there were certain questions that were quite predictive of people finding a match. And when we looked at these questions, it was a question, one of the questions that we came up with was, you know, would you quit your job and go sailing around the world? Does that fill you with excitement or dread? And for some people, clearly that was filling them with dread. And so for some people that was filling them with excitement. And when we started to probe these, we were looking, what we think that they were probing were people's personal values. You know, what's your attitude to risk? What is your attitude to exciting new experiences versus something that's more stable and secure? And so that was really interesting. And it led us to do some tests where we kind of created a profile based on some of these questions. And we were trying to use it in a business environment. So we were like, well, does this have anything to do with the world of work at all? Or is it completely, as romantic relationships, completely different from business relationships? So we created a profile which was asking these questions. And what we had was basically a hypothesis that if people had either similar values or at least a tolerance for each other's values, they would find it easier to work together. So we used this profile and we asked questions of teams that were entering a business plan competition. So asking the teams to sort of answer these profile questions, and then we were coming up with a prediction of whether that team was going to perform well in the competition or not, based on the profile alone. And what we did is actually we made our prediction whilst the teams were going through this business plan competition, and they were meeting the judges, they were submitting their business plans, and then we would make our prediction at the same time as the panel. And we found out we were getting the winner right. In 8 competitions in a row, we got the winner right. But we were also getting the rankings very close to what the judges were predicting. And that was really interesting. And that was our first entry point into sort of into trying to understand team dynamics. And that led to a product called Base. And what we then did is we started looking a lot into the research around in work groups, what makes an effective team. And there was a lot of consistency between what we'd seen in online dating and work, which is that although you want cognitive diversity in a team, you want people who think differently. If you have values diversity where people have very different belief systems, it's actually hard to get them working together. It's not impossible, but it's much harder. And then maybe I can come on to talk about CoachBot, which is our next product. But what we basically found was that Base was a profiling tool, and it was really interesting to understand team dynamics, but we wanted something that was going to be ongoing coaching app with the tool that they could use on an ongoing basis. And that's when we started to develop CoachBot.
So Tom, where people can find some of the researches that you did, or they're not public?
Yeah, no, there are. We've written up some of the research and some of the findings from those early experiments. So a lot of them are on our website. If you go into the Base product, you'll see some of the early findings and some of the blogs. We've published some of those early experiments in the business plan cases. So yeah, through the website. I mean, anytime anyone can get in touch with me. My email is tom@saber, saber.com. And I'd be happy to send them.
Is it like www.saber.com?
Yeah, www.saber.com.
I think I did I get it right? Yes, I think so. In your email, I will post the email too on the chat box. So before we dive into the team CoachBot, can you just give us a little insight of what did you find that is important for an effective team dynamic and for teams to be successful?
Sure. So the headline, I mean, I think from the research we've been doing, so one of the things we've done, a lot of research into the academic literature in terms of what makes teams effective, and also what working with coaches. So practically working with team coaches, people like Peter Hawkins, who sits on our advisory board, George Caceres. There's a range of team coaches that we've been working with. And I guess that, we would distill what makes a great team into sort of three key stages, I think. The first one is around, we have a model called Get Set, Get Safe, and Get Strong. And the first stage is around getting set, which is that great teams are really, really clear on what they're trying to achieve. And I think, Richard Hackman and Ruth Vagerman go deep into the research about the importance of an upfront clarity in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So are we clear on our purpose? Are we clear on our roles? Are we clear on the shared goals we have? Do we have established norms of how we're going to interact with each other that we're comfortable with? That clarity up front is the first stage and a critical stage in terms of making a great team. The next stage, we talk about getting safe. So here we sort of, we're great fans of the research that Amy Edmondson has done in terms of psychological safety in teams, and how it is important that everyone in the team feels free to speak up and say what they really feel.
Mm-hmm.
the teams have to have this environment where they can build trust, there is psychological safety, you can fail and learn. And so that's a kind of key second stage. And then the final stage we think about is around teams getting strong. How can we build on the fact that we're clear on our objectives, we have a safe environment, but then we challenge each other robustly. And if we've got a diverse team with very different views, we're not afraid to have robust discussions and disagreements. Great teams are not necessarily the teams that are in perfect harmony because they challenge each other. It's not that everything is in flow and easy. In many of the great teams we've seen, there's real challenge and difficulties, and there's going to be highs and lows. But if you hold each other to account and you challenge each other robustly, you're going to get to a better solution, and you make that diversity in the teamwork.
Yeah.
We think about these three stages of get set, get safe, and get strong.
Thank you. Yes, the first red line when I go and work with teams is if they say don't have any conflict. And you say, well, then we have to create some, because this is the first side that something is dysfunctional here. You have to have this like healthy conflict conversations, challenges, as you said. That is the last. This is usually for teams that they're going to scale and keep on the high end of the curve, like high performing teams, and keep going to these directions. So tell us how you came up with the CoachBot, and what are the actual features and functions at the moment of the team CoachBot that they offer.
So off the back of the work we've done in developing Base to understand team dynamics and the difference in team members, we became clear that we wanted to develop a second product which would provide an ongoing engagement between the manager and the team, or the coach and the team. So we wanted it, as opposed to being a one-off profile, to be something that was regular use, more habitual. So the idea behind CoachBot came to say, well, we know that great teams, go through these certain sort of practices in terms of clarifying roles and having great conversations about, norms that they're going to work through. They have regular reflective conversations. They're a safe environment to learn. How can we create a product which encourages those habits? And so CoachBot is basically so the way that CoachBot works is it's a web app. So you sign on as a web app, and you sign on typically through your calendar integration. So you sign on and you integrate your calendar. And so CoachBot is already aware of some of the meetings you're going to have in your calendar, whether it's typically a Google or an Outlook calendar. And then what we do is we try and provide some very, very small prompts, very easy to use kind of little nudges and prompts, alongside some sort of more involved exercises that a manager can do with the team. So an example of, so once you come in and you've signed up with your calendar, you'll be on a dashboard and you'll be able to see, you'll be able to add team members. So maybe these are the direct reports you have in your team. You'll be able to add them into CoachBot. And then one of the things we're trying to do is encourage really, really good one-to-one conversations between a manager and team members. And the way we do that, for example, is one-to-ones are sort of universally used, I think, in teams. It's one of the kind of constructs within a team that everyone understands. Very many people having one-to-ones. But we did quite a lot of research about it, and we found out a lot of people aren't satisfied with the quality of those conversations that are going on. So the question for us, was how can we help a better conversation? And so what we did is if you invite CoachBot into your meeting agenda, if we're having a meeting, Vanya, and we invite CoachBot, CC that into the meeting, the day before we're due to meet, it will email us or send us a Slack notification or a Teams notification and say, why don't you co-create your agenda? And that act of co-creating an agenda is very important. So we're both parties to this conversation now. And then once we've done that, we'll have an agenda, and then we come to the meeting, and then we'll use some simple AI to pick up the themes in that agenda. So if one of the things in our agenda is we've got to resolve some conflict, or we've got to manage our goals better, or we've got to do better feedback, it will pick up some of the really consistent themes, and it will provide little suggestions of things that you might want to do related to goals or feedback or conflict, managing conflict. So we'll use some not overly sophisticated AI, but some AI to provide recommendations that you can use based on the agenda text that we've created together. So that's an example of a quite simple, very low time investment. All we had to do was invite CoachBot into our meeting. And what we're hoping to do is have a better conversation in our one-to-one as a result of that.
Great. Sorry, Jennifer here, I think it's a very good place to insert this question. Jennifer Nielsen said, I'm interested in how AI will be used and how we can serve as a coaches with the future of bots.
Yeah, so I think I think our view at the moment is AI, in the short term, people tend to overestimate the impact it's going to have. And in the long term, we underestimate the impact it's going to have. Particularly in the area that we are operating in, the team space. One of the interesting things is you need a lot of data in order to use AI.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there isn't historically a lot of data that you can use to train AI on team dynamics.
Absolutely.
So one of the things we need to do is we need to create the data set. And we're seeing that with the evolution of things like Slack and Microsoft Teams. We are now starting to see a different data set. So this is coming. But I think there are other applications where bots, so for example, I think where bots are already very established is in areas like HR support functions, where you have quite a simple data set. You've got a lot of history of that data set to search, and you can create a bot that provides an answer to a relatively simple question set. So in that application, AI is being used in a very narrow sense to answer very specific questions already. But in our particular area around teams, it's going to take a little bit longer because we need to create the data set in the first place.
Yeah. And if coaches want to integrate, for example, the team coaching bot that Sever developed, is that possible? Is that available yet, or you're planning to? What is
yes, very much. So as I say, sort of our primary. So we're working with people like I mentioned. We're working with Peter Hawkins. So we've developed a program with Peter, where a lot of the coaches that we're working with are working with quite senior teams. These are particularly team coaches that we've been working with as opposed to individual coaches. So with very senior teams, what we see is that they will use elements of the bot, but a lot of them they're looking for a kind of human contact still. They still want the human coaching support from senior team coaches. So what a lot of the programs we're looking at is, whilst those senior teams are getting human coaching, there are tens, hundreds or thousands of teams that are getting nothing. They're not getting any team support at all. And so what we're looking at is providing a solution where we work with the coach. The coach particularly works with the senior teams. And then to scale the impact of the coaching, they use CoachBot across the rest of the organization with entry mid-level managers, particularly in the teams they're working with, to provide this infrastructure that encourages a coaching mindset within the business. And then the role of the coach is more of a curator for those teams. So coming in and working with the team managers around how they're kind of developing as a coach for the team. So it's an interesting model where we are we're very much working alongside coaches to create a team coaching culture. And that is blending both, human coaching and using CoachBot at the same time.
What do you think it takes to create a team coaching culture?
That's a really interesting question. So I think there are various stages to doing that. I think it's really helpful if it's driven from the top. If you've got a culture at the top where the team is clearly operating as a team, not a dysfunctional set of individuals. And I think, most of the time with the very senior teams, it is still 90% driven by a human coach. They occasionally use, elements of CoachBot to support their practice, just as they might use a psychometric or another, instrument in their practice. But I think one of the things to create a coaching culture is, how do we have impact at scale? And this is where I think technology comes into play, is to help two things. One is scalability, because, many of the people we're working with say, I can't afford your coaching fees for all of the business. And also practically, it's just not possible to use a coach with every team. But if you have a technology that provides a more scalable model that can help develop those habits, that can really help. And I think the second area that really technology can very much help create a coaching culture is through reinforcement. So you can kind of create some ideas around, well, we want to discuss what our team goals are, or we want to discuss our team norms, but how do you make sure that you reinforce those? How do you make sure that the team go back to look at the commitment they've made around their team goals or their team norms and how they're going to work with each other? And this is where coach, I think technology can play a real role to check in, remind the team, prompt the team, ask the team how, are they living to the norms that they established? Because the technology can be there 24/7 and a coach can't. And so I think creating a coaching culture requires a combination of hearts and minds, people caring about coaching, wanting to become a coach, but also technology can really help create the habits. We know technology can help create habits because anyone who's got a teenage kid understands, the impact technology can have in terms of creating habits. But can we reinforce good habits of reflection, of checking in with each other, of reminding us about sort of, kind of shared goals we've created together? And I think that's where I think this blend of hearts and minds delivered through empathetic models of coaching that people understand and is often, led by humans, but coach kind of technology to support and reinforce and scale that can really help create a coaching culture.
We have a question. How can we as coaches remain competitive and relevant amidst coaching bots becoming more and more popular and cheaper than humans?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the key thing is, I think this is true in all walks of life. A lot of the simple routine tasks will be automated going forward. And I think that's true whether you're in accountancy, whether you're in medical diagnostics, whether you're in, any industry. We're going to see routine process-driven tasks that it's very hard to compete with technology. But there are many areas where, as I say, across kind of general intelligence, it's a very, very long time until we will have general intelligence in a coaching bot. You will have very specific intelligence around a very specific issue, but general intelligence to be able to read a room, understand, empathize with the team members, intervene because of the intonation or because of the way someone is speaking, that will take a very long time. And so I think the key thing is for the humans to focus on adding technology into their armory for the routine process-driven tasks, but focus on where technology simply can't compete with humans at this stage.
Absolutely, I agree. The more complex coaching you can do, the more difficult it's going to be for you to be replaced. But I recently also wrote an article on LinkedIn, and I will post it in the chat box, that the ways for coaches to partner with CoachBots.
Yes.
And I think it's very interesting because you can utilize what is already on the market to make yourself and your brand unique, distinguishable, and also benefit from what CoachBots in general can offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and I come back to these two things in terms of technology can really offer you. It can help scale your impact.
mm-hmm.
So, with the coaches we work with, they can coach maybe 1 or 2 teams at a time, but with CoachBot, you could be coaching 30 teams. But technology would be doing a lot of the support work in many of those teams, and you would be acting as a sort of coach supervisor to the technology. So I think coaches working with CoachBots, whether that's individual coaching, so there are also some really interesting individual coach apps on the market. It's not an area we operate in, but I think they can also reinforce a lot of the coaching you've been doing. And this area of reinforcement is the other area I think they can support. You've done a coaching session with an individual or with a team, but you want to make sure that session, the things you've established, are reinforced. How are we going to ensure that these things actually happen? And that's where technology can really help. So I'm a huge believer in the fact that technology should not be replacing human coaching. It should be augmenting it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find the right, where technology is really strong and has a competitive advantage, and where humans have a competitive advantage.
Yes. So other question is, does this future of CoachBots and working with teams presume that the coaches are more internal than external?
I don't think there's any sort of specific assumption to say that if internal coaches should be working with CoachBots and external not. I think both internal and external coaches can use technology, can leverage it. I mean, I think the one thing that there will undoubtedly be some caution about is sharing kind of data across organizations, and the data privacy implications of doing that need to be managed very carefully. But I think both internal and coaches outside organizations can leverage technology.
Yeah. I also think just opening up your mind and eyes for what is on the market and what the possibilities are. And it's my biggest purpose of this webinar is not to really teach you, but to give you opportunity to know what is available, and to kind of like for you to be able, as a coach, to be able to know what are your options, what you can explore more, and what is good for you and what maybe is not for you. But definitely the more tech savvy and the more better we are as a coaches with technology and utilize it as much as soon as possible in the long term, that will serve us.
I couldn't agree more. We're great believers in try it and see, test it out, try it with a team, see how it works, see what's good, because obviously different contexts. I mean, one of the kind of real complexities of the fact we work with teams is, there's so many different types of teams, and the context of those teams is critical for understanding where you need to start the coaching engagement. So, as mentioned, leadership teams or intact teams or project teams, short-term projects, long-term projects. the conditions in these different cases are very, very different. And so testing things out to understand where they're landing best, what's working. It's really good to get your hands on the tool to try it out. We're very happy to work with coaches for a trial to see what it's like with the team as well, just to get a feel for it. And so, yeah, I'm a great believer in, learn by doing, try it.
Yeah, when we talk about teams and team coaching, can you just give us the significant differences between coaching teams and coaching individuals?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there is a big difference. So coaching individuals is very well established. I think, sort of probably the majority of coaching is focused on individual coaching, but there is a sort of growing profession in the team coaching space. And we've been working with, people like Peter Hawkins, who I've mentioned, David Clutterbuck, a lot of the work that's been coming out of the US with Ruth Hackman and Ruth Reagan and Richard Hackman. I think that the has shown that even if you're coaching a team and you're coaching each individual in that team, that is not the same as coaching the team as a whole, where you're discussing collective goals, collective requirements. The analogy I always use, because I'm a soccer fan or a football fan, as we say in the UK, is, when you're a sports coach, you need to be able to coach individuals in the team and put your arm around your lead, striker or your defender and make sure you're getting the best out of them. But you also have to coach the team as a whole in terms of, okay, this is how we attack. These are our attacking drills. These are our defensive drills. And they have to work as a unit. And the same is true in business. If you coach individuals in isolation, you can have impact. But our belief is that you can have significantly more impact if you can coach the team as a whole as a manager. So you are able to get the collective dynamic of that team to be more than the sum of its parts. And so that's why we believe, that's why we're very much focused on team coaching and supporting managers to become the coach for their team.
And why do you think the hype of team coaching became so higher in the last 2 years? Then team coaching exists for more than a decade, and people like David Clutterbuck, I've been working with him closely. He wrote 30 years ago about team coaching, but all of a sudden now it seems like people are more aware and waking up that they need additional skills, they need additional training. The benefit of what team coaching can offer versus individual coaching is like much more higher, the level of knowledge. So what do you think is that?
I think it's partly because the world we live in is becoming more and more complex, and a lot of the problems that we need to solve cannot be solved by an individual alone. So I think you see this in, let's take the crisis we're in right now with COVID-19. It will not be one scientist who cracks the vaccine. It will be a team of scientists working together, collaborating to come up with a vaccine. If you look at Nobel Prizes over the last decade, increasingly they're being awarded to teams rather than individuals. But we're also seeing this in the world of business. In technology, the area I work, most of the sort of really high growth tech companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and others, primarily focus on supporting teams to do complex work to build products. And the whole sort of agile development space, I think, is driven around empowering teams to do great work together. So I think, and I think what we're seeing now when we go into companies is more and more companies are saying, I can get a lot out of individual, contributions, but I can get more out of empowering great teams. And so, and they've seen that from the sort of stellar growth of these kind of tech companies, which have eating the world in terms of valuation. So I think it's been driven by many things, but I do think the kind of complexity of the world we live in at the moment, and these examples of the power of teamwork, and how it can, do great things, whether it's in science or in business, and many other fields as well, means that people are more and more interested by saying, okay, how do we make that happen? How do we kind of, how do we bottle some of that so that it's much more kind of like a cultural thing that we can do across the whole business? A completely different example that I think is very interesting is Stanley McChrystal, who led the U.S. Army in Iraq post occupation, and he wrote a book called The Team of Teams, saying, even in the army, it's impossible to run it through individual contribution. It's impossible to run it through a command control structure. You have to empower teams on the ground to make decisions. And so in every sphere, we're seeing organizations sort of wake up to the power of team dynamics. And then I think team coaching, there's so many great learnings from people like David and Peter. And the question is, okay, they've got the experience in terms of making teams work. How do we bottle that? How do we get the best out of that and apply it more holistically across the organization?
Yeah, I recently read a book, The Culture Code, and the culture code. Sorry.
Culture.
Yes, my accent is just like staying on my way. So there was like multiple examples of successful teams and what made them successful, and one of that was in relation to the army and a team going to Afghanistan for to catch Osama bin Laden. I don't remember which year was that, but so the example that they gave is like they thought that they have plan as a team, but nothing went by plan. And what helped them, it was crucial that they were connected and they know that everybody depends on the other person, and nobody is gonna bail out, and they listed the successful factors for this part of these typical situations, and they connected to many other multiple teams. And as you said in the beginning of our conversation, there are 3 levels of development of high-performing teams. But the most important is technology cannot replicate the sense of safety that you create in your team. The coach can lead you to create that. But what technology can help you is to reinforce and help you practice. And some of the question on the chatbot is which of these technology products or companies are available for coaches, for individual coaches to use or to join in order to make their practice more successful.
Yeah, so there are a number of sort of, I think it's interesting that one example of a chatbot that was used actually related to the army was to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, where soldiers came back from engagement, and they sort of tested whether conversations with a bot might help them deal with some sort of PTSD. And they found actually that in some cases, soldiers actually preferred conversing with the bot because they didn't feel judged. They were able to follow some guidelines based on, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to support soldiers through something as complex as, PTSD. And so that's an example of an individual coaching app being applied to support a soldier. There are definitely kind of individual apps out there that can support individual coaching. and there's a few. I don't want to mention one and not mention a range. So best I can kind of post it to you afterwards to kind of come back with a range of different options people can try and use if they're looking for support in individual coaching. But yeah, there are some really interesting examples out there, and there's things like CoachBot, which is not necessarily looking at again dealing with stress and anxiety and supporting, which is a fun one to test out and use and try. But there are a number of others out there as well, which worth getting your hands on and giving a go.
Yes, and some of them I mentioned in one of the last article that was just posted, some names of bots that they could be utilized. The other thing is you can, for pretty small amount of money, you can develop yours based on your model and methodology that you're coaching. And bots are very good with sending notification materials, just engaging into this first level of conversation that you want to keep caught the attention and keep the engagement going. So there are many available. We have to, when we know that this is possibility, we can start looking and learning more. That's for sure. So where do you think, if we talk about artificial intelligence, where do you think we are at the moment with the development in relation to coaching? Because there are other areas that is very advanced.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're as I say, I think, we're still quite early stage in terms of particularly the use of AI. I think the narrower the problem you're trying to solve, the further ahead. The two conditions to make CoachBots sort of look sophisticated. One is if you've got a very narrow problem you're trying to solve, it makes it easier to develop a bot to solve that problem rather than general intelligence with, lots of different variables. So that's one of the kind of things that we face is there are so many variables in a team, it makes it much more complex. So where we use AI within CoachBot, we're using it to solve narrow issues. So can we read the agenda in a one-to-one and then provide some smart suggestions of reading or exercises you might want to do? So we're taking a team scope, which is quite big, finding a specific issue, which is much narrower and saying, let's use AI in that space. I think, so where is AI at the moment? It's still, quite narrow. I think, again, the other question is, how much data is there? AI relies on data. In some areas like the HR, self-service model that we talked about, there's a lot of data that you can use to train the model and to make the AI more intelligent against that narrow scope. So those two key questions around how big is the data set you've got, how broad or narrow is the problem you're trying to solve, determine at the moment where we're at. So if you're doing a narrow problem and you've got a lot of data, you're probably further along. If you're solving a much bigger problem and you haven't got much data, you're earlier. And that's probably where we're at in the team space. There was a brilliant HBR article which said, in many cases, before AI, you've got a UX problem. You've got a usability problem. Are people going to use the product? Are they going to get benefit out of it? So then you can build the data set and then you can start applying AI. So I think we're still quite early stage as an industry. It's quite early stage, but I do believe, it would be very foolhardy to underestimate the impact it's going to have in the next 5 to 10 years. Because I think that's going to be a very, very significant impact. So I come back to this, this framing. Probably we have a tendency to overestimate where we're at now in the short term, but I think we could easily underestimate where it's going to have an impact in 5 to 10 years' time.
Yes, I agree. Definitely. And what kind of skills coaches can develop now in order to be in these 5-10 years competitive and still relevant to the market?
So I think there are two different kinds of skills. I think there's the skills that we have as humans, where technology is not going to replace us. So things
not
like,
yet. Not in
for
a
a
lot.
very long time.
We would like to believe that.
Yeah, well, I do believe. I think it'll take a very long time. So I think the ability to have empathy, the ability to apply ethical judgment, the ability to look at context and say, because any model that you train is dependent on the data you've got to train it, and you're inevitably making some conclusions about, you know, where you're putting your boundaries. So what humans can do is they can say, well, yeah, but we're in a different context here. We need to think differently because we've trained the model based on this set of data, but actually we've got a whole new set of data we need to be thinking about. So I think there are some skills as humans that we need to be developing. And I think, you know, need to be developing not only in our coaches, but in our children. There was a wonderful, even, you know, Jack Ma, who's the CEO of Alibaba, who is, you know, heavily invested in technology and AI. He himself said that the things we need to be training our children on is, you know, creativity, empathy, working in teams, understanding each other. These are things that it's going to take a very long time for, you know, if ever, technology to replace. So I think one part of what coaches should develop is their human capabilities, if you like. And then the other part, I think, is learning to integrate technology into your practice. So become more digitally aware, be open to testing things out and learning about it, as you said. Feel confident with sort of, you know, basic digital skills. So I think there are two elements to that. One is inherently human, and the other one is about embracing technology and not being fearful of it. And I think we need to do both.
Yeah, and you mentioned ethics, and ethics is a big topic in the field of AI, but I also think it's a big topic in the field of coaching. And one of my previous guests mentioned that if you want to be competitive in the long term, you niche very well and you find your expertise and you dive deeper and you utilize technology into that and you expand on that. The more broader you are, the more difficult it will be to compete, because all these tech companies going to come up with products that they will take over, and in the long run they will outperform you. But be specific of what you offer as a coach. And I would say ethics, if you want to find a niche, ethics is a very good niche for coaches to expand on their expertise and knowledge and coach on ethics, because you can go through different businesses and apply that as an ethical coach. And I was remembering, like, a few years ago, I was looking for ethics coach to present for us, and it was very difficult and very expensive to find out. So if you guys need any ideas, here you go. Here is one.
Yeah, I definitely think there are many areas where ethics and understanding, but also ethics as it relates to sort of technology as well. You know, so what are the ethics of technology is going to be a huge area. So yeah, I mean, although I would say, I think it's interesting what you say about being very niche, but I do think there is still a road for broad coaching and consulting as well, because of this problem that in some respects technology is easier if you're very narrowing against a very defined problem. Technology, I think, against very sort of complex multi-dimension problems is going to be harder to create as well. So I would slightly challenge I definitely think there is a role for niche coaching and consulting, but I also think there is a human role for more strategic consulting and coaching as well. So coaching a top team, I don't think for a very long time we're going to be displacing people like Peter and David Clutterbuck. They will be coaching top teams on dynamics of top teamwork, and that's quite a broad topic and complex topics. So I think there's room for both.
Perhaps yes, but they are experts of team coaching and mentoring. So when you come from this level of expertise, then it's much easier to just stay with that and say, this is my expertise and this is how I present myself. And the level of conversation you're gonna have is up to the team, what they're gonna bring, because you can never be an expert in so many like strategic and tech points and etc. So that's what I was referring for. I just want to say thank you for joining me today. My pleasure and honor to be your host and to provide this like meaningful conversation and information to my guests. And thank you to ICF Orange County for having me for so long and supporting me. Thank you. And I will hand back to our ICF host.
Thank you so much, Vanya. Thank you so much, Tom. I have to say that as I've been listening, I've just been incredibly inspired. So I think before listening to this, I didn't feel like technology would be that accessible to an individual coach. But as I listen to you, I start feeling like maybe technology will be a lot more accessible and I'll be able to integrate it into my coaching practice as well. It looks like a lot of comments are coming in. Thank you. Very enlightening. And yep, an excellent topic on many levels. So we've got a lot of people that were really enthusiastic. I loved everything you had to say, Tom. And thank you so much, Vanya, for bringing Tom to us. For those of you who are part of ICF Orange County, we have another topic coming up just in 2 days. Our virtual meeting is this Thursday evening, and we'll be having Denise Hedges talk about selling without hyper manipulation using the coaching competencies. And I know that that's a big topic for a lot of coaches because we want to sell, but we also have an ethics code. We don't manipulate people. And so imposing our sales agenda on our clients can be quite tricky. And Denise is going to talk to us about how to sell with integrity. So again, thank you so much, Vanya. Thank you so much, Tom. And I think we have a couple of more coaching and technology sessions later in the year where we have a couple of more technology guests. And Tom, we're going to be very excited to continue to follow you in your work.
Yeah, our next one is on August 4th.
August 4th, yep.
Yes, and most likely it's going to be related to team coaching, but from the assessment perspective and technology, how to implement technology into the assessment piece of the coaching relationship.
That's going to be really useful. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.